Auckland Transport update. While the Auckland Transport personnel make their way to the front desk, as always, this is an opportunity for councillors and the Mayor to ask the AT representatives about any transport matters that relate to their ward and indeed to the wider Auckland region, and that's consistent with the oversight function of this committee. I do have a little introduction. I hope you'll just bear with me because there's been a bit of activity with a number of long-serving AT personnel. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Richard Leggett, who's the newly appointed chair of the Auckland Transport Board, and we certainly look forward to the ongoing engagement, Richard, over the balance of your term, and we have invited Richard to say a few words at the start of the item. We would also like to acknowledge Mark Darrow, who was the acting chair of AT, and certainly thank Mark for stepping into the breach during that period. Finally, we'd also like to acknowledge Wayne Donnelly, who finished his service with Auckland Transport Board at the end of the month, I believe, and Wayne is retiring after many years of service to Auckland Transport and indeed to the City of Auckland. Wayne certainly brought considerable experience and a huge wealth of knowledge in the transport sector, having previously had senior roles at the Ministry of Transport, Land Transport New Zealand, Transfund, Rodney District Council and Auckland City Council. He's been on the board since 2016 and of course, as we're aware, acted as the board chair from October 2022 until November 2023, which we certainly appreciated. During that time, Wayne provided leadership and advice to the council. Wayne has said that it certainly was his privilege to guide the board and the executive through what was a fairly challenging political, financial and operational time, and he certainly had the experience to draw upon and indeed the support of other members of AT. So we certainly wish Wayne all the very best for the future, and I think at some point Councillor Fletcher will move some appropriate acknowledgement in the resolutions. So welcome, Richard, and I'm sure councillors will like to see a brief introduction from yourself.
Tēnā koutou katoa. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honour to be selected as the chair of Auckland Transport, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm a week into the job, so it's very new, although I've done a bit of reading and have chatted to people prior to my official start on the 1st of February. I don't know most of you, so very brief background. From a governance perspective, last 15 years I've been a professional director. I've had a number of roles on government boards, so New Zealand Post Tourism, New Zealand Education New Zealand, private sector Warren and Marnie, and a couple of small entities. I was on Waterfront Auckland at the tail end of Waterfront Auckland, and then was on Eke Panuku for 6 years. So I've got good governance experience and pretty good experience in the public sector. I've also done a reasonable amount of sports governance, and those that know me know that my main mode of transport around the city is bicycle. So I'm a keen cyclist in various guises, including being a mammal, for all the sins that mammals bring. I've been in the role, as I said, for a week. There's a couple of themes that I thought I would share, but I'm not in a position really to answer any detailed questions at this stage. So the two themes, number one is the role that Auckland Transport should play, in my view, in the transportation sector in the Auckland region. We have the expertise and experience, and we are the subject matter experts on transport in Auckland. and I don't think that is fully acknowledged locally and certainly in Wellington. I would like to see, and in terms of success for the board and for me personally, is that the reputation of Auckland Transport in 18 months to 3 years is such that we are trusted and respected to be able to develop the strategies and the tactics and do the delivery for an integrated Auckland transport system that fits into the city that you as councillors want. And I think one of the dangers at the moment is that certainly under the previous government, and I don't know what this government's view is going to be, the centralisation and decision-making that Wellington has undertaken on behalf of Auckland Region and Auckland Transport, I think is not leading to the best outcomes. Now, I understand again, a lot of this is reputation. We as Auckland Transport need to be regarded very highly by Wellington, so they are willing to allow us to have a more prominent say in matters that are key to Auckland. As an example, ATAP is chaired by the Ministry of Transport. My strong view, even though I've only been in the job for a week, is that that really should be a role that Auckland Transport chairs. And we bring in, and Councillor Fletcher mentioned before, the Integrated Transport Plan. We should be at the centre of that. And we should be working with Ports of Auckland, Kiwi Rail, Wakatahi, Ministry of Transport, and you as the council to develop a comprehensive integrated transport plan that will make Auckland a very successful city over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So that's kind of theme number one, is that I'm very keen that, and I know Dean and the team is relatively new and we are improving in a number of areas. We need to continue to improve to get your trust and respect. Likewise, Wellington. So that's theme number one. Theme number two is that to be a successful city, we need a transport network that works well and enables safe, easy and reliable journeys, people getting A to B. And I like little mantras and I like repetition because I think it gets messages through. So safe, easy, reliable is what our goal for transport is. In an environment where the supply of roads is pretty fixed, there aren't going to be a lot more roads, and demand is going to increase very strongly over the next 30 years with increased population. We need to use our network more efficiently, and the way to do that is getting more people in vehicles, and that's public transport. So my second theme is public transport is the absolute key to ensuring that we can deliver a city that you want and shape. And look, it's starting to go quite well. We are seeing upwards of 20% growth year on year in public transport. We are over the crisis of the bus drivers. The ferries are starting to deliver, and we have some very good things coming. The Eastern Busway, the Northwestern Busway pop-up, and CRL, as well as open loop ticketing, will all be significant catalysts that will encourage people to use public transport more often. So I would like to think in 3 years' time that we are starting to develop a public transport network that is desirable to Aucklanders, is efficient, provides safe, easy and reliable journeys, and is seen as something that complements and quite often substitutes for use of private vehicles. So they're my two key themes. And from Auckland Council AT relationship, we want and would like you to provide us direction of where you want the city to go. But I think that you need to have faith and trust in us that we can develop the strategies and the tactics and do the delivery to ensure that Auckland City, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, is the type of city that you want. That's me.
Right, thank you, Richard, and we look forward to developing those themes in tandem with Auckland Transport. Okay, and without any further ado, over to you, Dean and Stacey, to present the update for the last couple of months.
Yeah, kia ora everybody, and it's good to be back in front of you after a few months' break, and I'm looking forward to today. We've got, across the agenda today, we've got a number of specific topics, including temporary traffic management, time of use charging, our dynamic lanes, and I'll be inviting a variety of our team that lead those individual programs of work to the table. And of course we've got Stacey here that will pick up on the public transport and peak season readiness. And we've also got Hamish Bunn, who will lead our response on the draft regional land transport plan. But can I just start off with some recent highlights? Given that the last time we met was in December, you might recall we went out with what we called the Great Summer Road Reno. This was our way of reminding Aucklanders that whilst we wanted to, we couldn't actually get out and do a lot of road renovation the previous year because of the flooding. And that was a great success for us. The objective there was to remind Aucklanders that we're back, we're able to get in, we're able to do road rehabilitation, renovation, remediation, and that they would see us, that we would be present. Yes, there would be disruption, but the objective is a good outcome. And we've had really strong support for that, so the role that individual councillors have played, and on local board, likewise, I know many of them aren't here, has been really important. And that program is on track. We've completed, as at the end of December, about 155 kilometres. We've got another 40 in January, and there's more to come over the balance of this summer season. I was really pleased too, over summer, there was no deaths on the roads in Auckland region. So that's a good outcome. The Eastern Railway line is open for rail, which is good, but we've still got a lot of work to do with Kiwi Rail between now and CRL go live. There's a lot of work still to be done on the rail network that will continue to be disruptive. Like Richard said, really pleased with the bounce in public transport patronage. Last week, we were averaging 92% of our target, and that our target was 100 million passengers month on month, late last year, early this year. So my guess is we'll be as close as anything to achieving that by the end of March. If we get there, month on month, that'll be a 25% lift in public transport use. That's, in my world, that's world class. But we won't be finishing there, we'll be pressing hard and kicking on. Really pleased to have Richard on board and to settle the new board into its stride. If I can just make a comment about governance and the board, the constant change at a board level does impact your ability to deliver. You need that consistency, and so I welcome you, Richard. That consistency of focus, strategic oversight and insight is going to be extremely valuable. If I can, I've got the clicker. I've talked to the content, so what I'd like to do now, and I'm sure there'll be questions on the way through, but I'd like to now go to some of those more specific topics. So if I can invite Tracy Burkhan up, and then Mel Alexander, you're on notice, followed by Tracy and Mark Lambert on time of use charging. But Tracy, are you okay to lead out now on an update on temporary traffic management code of practice work? Thank you.
Kia ora, everybody. Lots of work in this space. I think that the great Auckland Road Reno also was a great Auckland temporary traffic management experience, or not so great in some cases. I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Hills for his extremely helpful and proactive keeping us honest and calling us to task for some of the sites in his area that we've been able to make some changes and put some sustainable systems around stopping those sorts of things happening again. I also had some very constructive conversations with Councillor Bartley about making roadworks visible, allowing your constituents to be able to see an integrated picture of what's been happening across the network, and we've got work and train in both of those areas on new initiatives. We are working, I think the message really from me this month is we are working every day to change things up, to proactively recognise hotspots, but also again acknowledge that you are often our eyes and ears on the network, and you often hear things the same time as we do or before we do, and really appreciate those things being brought to our attention so that we can move fast and try to resolve some of the issues for people in Auckland. One of the pushes that we've had in the last month since we talked to you in December is a real targeted cost reduction program of work. That's manifesting in a number of ways. We're in workshops with our utilities in Auckland and the CCOs about working with them to reduce their costs, as well as working with AT as its own development arm to reduce our own costs in the temporary traffic management space. Big ups to Watercare. They've been extremely proactive in bringing us proposals to reduce temporary traffic management as far as their projects are concerned, and we're working through a suite of changes to their projects and the approvals that we give them to allow them to reduce the cost of TTM and in fact reduce the number of cones and the disruption to Aucklanders. We're also looking at initiatives concerning practical things like night works, increasing construction work hours on the network so we can put more shifts in, do the job faster and get out faster, so reducing the actual construction window. A number of other, what's my slides just gone backwards once? Yeah, I've got some notes here. A number of other initiatives in the back office with enhanced corridor access application processes. We're putting more on the contractor in the form of initially a self-assessment tool where they do the thinking. They understand, it's dual purpose. One is educating that contractor of the impact they're having on the network, trying to frame their reality away from just their own ends and rather the greater impact they're having on the travelling public of Auckland, but also allowing us to gather a whole lot more information up front so that we can better plan and better coordinate works on the network that will go live in the next month. And we're leading the industry co-design workshops, which include, as I say, utilities, the CCOs, contractors and other developers in the area, for example, Kāinga Ora, who are doing large tracts of work on our network in order that we all have the same imperative to reduce cost, reduce disruption and have better communication so that people know before they leave home in the morning where they shouldn't be travelling or that they've got viable options to navigate the work that needs to be done on our network to bring progress to Auckland. Happy to take any questions.
I think we'll go through and have all the presentations then come back to people at the end, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. Just, I know there's a big emphasis on cost and better, faster, cheaper, which we all like, but I just want to put this into hard dollar terms. We're not, without compromising safety, we're taking a risk-based approach to safety on TTM. The Code of Practice sets out how we need to do that, but on the other side is an entity that also needs to put in temporary traffic management. On some recent projects, the cost of temporary traffic management provision is around 5%. That's a significant reduction from what it has been in the past, and certainly a significant reduction on one-off projects. and we've set an objective of no project costing more than 10%. Now, to get there, you've got to have a significant number that sit below that, and that is a significant reduction on what has been done in the past. So that's the development arm saying we will rethink construction methodology, we'll rethink how we bundle and do programs of work, we'll think on a more risk-based approach to delivering this, and every dollar we save there, we can invest in an outcome. And so that would be an example of how we're approaching that, and working very closely with Tracy as the regulator part to ensure that we balance safety with productivity and cost, okay? But thank you, Tracy, and we're sure there'll be plenty of questions of that. Mel, you're going to update us on progress with respect to dynamic lanes and bus prioritisation. Thank you.
Kia ora committee. Yes, a short update on dynamic lanes and dynamic streets programme for part optimisation. As identified in the presentation, there's 2 projects in design. They've actually just gone through a consultation and public engagement for Maioro, and that's between Blockhouse Bay and Richardson Maioro intersection, and the Great North Road as well. So we're currently reviewing the consultation feedback. There's a number of submissions made, particularly for Great North Road, with some concerns raised by the local residents, and we're taking both of those projects to the relevant local boards later this month or early next month, depending on their meeting timeframes, to seek their feedback and input into those projects before they move forward into final detailed design and rollout. We also have a number of projects happening across the region in terms of adaptive use of bus lanes, particular Main Highway and Ellerslie-Panmure Highway. We're looking at how we can roll out more dynamic timeframes for that. And we have actually moved forward in terms of working with some of the stakeholders out there, with public engagement due to start later this month, and also moving forward with NZTA to get approval of the use of those regulatory signage. We also have a programme of projects currently moving into an investigation phase for next year to try and accelerate and harmonise with the public transport rollout plans, which includes around 9 dynamic routes across the region, and actively looking at some of the dynamic timings, especially for emergency route planning and event use, which will be happening over the next few months. Also shown on the slide is some of our technology rollouts, in particular the bus booster sites. As committee may be aware, we've been rolling those out over the last year, and now we've introduced 26 new locations, particularly on the northwestern improvement routes, including Lincoln Road. And we're currently investigating a next tranche for development and rollout in the coming year. There's also improvements happening in terms of real-time optimisation based on technology such as cameras to help support when we have incidents on the network, and also identifying where we can reduce congestion and delays and operate signals more proactively and quickly. That's a very short update for committee. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. If we can, Tracy and Mark, if you could join us, give us an update on time of use charging. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Good morning, councillors, Mayor. Just a quick update on time of use charging and where we've got to. I have recently rejoined AT in a role of Executive Programme Manager, so I will be looking at taking this forward over the next short while. So a very quick update following the TIC presentation in November. We've been working with Council closely on developing a more detailed implementation plan, including identifying requirements, resources, activities across a number of work streams such as governance and decision making, system purpose and objective development, specifications and community engagement. Tracy has been leading this over the last couple of months and knows a little bit more about some of the more deliberative engagement with communities that have been undertaken recently as well. But I understand from Michael Roth that a deliberative forum on the future of transport in Auckland will be coming back to the committee in the next couple of meetings, which did include questions around time of use charging, which is positive, and we're also engaging with the Northern Infrastructure Forum on a potential community panel to take that forward as well and to delve deeper into system objectives and purpose. The CE also has met with the MOT and the Minister of Transport to engage further initial conversations on time of use charging, and particularly where legislation is at, draft legislation. And we've commenced further meetings with stakeholders, including NZTA and NZTA's current supplier of their upgrade of their national tolling system, which obviously may potentially offer an opportunity around technology moving forward as well. So that was a very quick update. Tracy, is there anything you wanted to add?
Nothing to add, Mark, thank you.
So maybe, Chair, on those three, is it worth us just stopping and asking questions on those three packages, or would you like us to continue and into public transport and RLTP?
Yeah, I think we'll go through them, Dean, and people can just come back to everyone at the end. I think that'd
Yeah,
be
okay,
best,
that's
yeah.
fine, thank you. All right, Stacey, I think you'll lead out on this one, and Hamish, you'll be on shortly.
Good morning, everybody. I mean, as you're all aware, this time of year we do get really busy on public transport as everybody returns to school, goes back to university, and so it is a real pinch point in our network. So in terms of, can we just flip the...
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. There's quite a bit in terms of that we've been doing to prepare for that. So part of that was actually what I call exchanging out some low performing bus routes in order to supplement those heavy corridors that we've already seen real pinch points on. So in terms of the 22, the 27, 75. So we put extra capacity on them at the end of January to sort of support that, and we've also increased bus sizes on a number of key routes, so in terms of a large bus versus an extra large bus, and we'll talk a little bit more about what bus loadings look like in real terms. We've also got obviously our daily operations team, so they've actually started early this year in terms of having daily stand-ups, looking at the capacity across the network and where those pinch points are and what we can do to sort of pivot to support that. I mean, as Dean said, we've already seen like a really big pickup this year. So 92% last week, and it's probably no surprise that bus is a real heavy lifter. So a good example, yesterday we actually came in at about 93.4% in terms of comparative to 2019, but it was just over 100% on bus. So this is really important to understand. So being over 100% on bus, yet we're not at what I would call the peak of the peak, it means that we're going to be very busy when we do get there. So starting early is going to help prevent some of what we usually see at the start of March. A couple of key things about the network though. So whilst we have what I call relative equal sort of capacity across the entire network on a day, it does look different. So start of last year, the team, what they did was a network recast, and that meant they took out a lot of the peak frequency. So they took out a lot of the peak frequency and put it throughout the day to give a more even timetable, which also alleviated some issues with bus drivers in terms of a huge volume of split shifts. So it was the right thing to do at the right time. But that means that we have 20%, which is quite significant, less capacity on some of our key arterials coming into the city. And so that's something that we're obviously going to be managing and watching on the daily to see how that goes. We do expect that we're going to need to be quite dynamic in terms of doing things like short runners on the busway and sort of managing on the day-to-day. So regular sort of stand-ups with our operators, see what they're seeing, getting that driver feedback and feedback across the network to make sure that we can actually pivot really quickly to address that. You would have seen in recent media yesterday, and I do thank the councillors that have supported that conversation, Councillor Simpson and yourself, Councillor Hills, in terms of that, because these things, they do come up every year. And we do have to make sure that we get really good communication from the schools so we can prevent these type of instances, so we know what roll numbers look like, but also be able to, support the school to understand what available routes are within that area that maybe not dedicated school buses, but are urban buses and can support that. And not everybody's going to be able to get a seat. And that's just what we need to do to manage utilisation of assets within the restrictions that we have. And so in terms of somebody saying there's 44 seats on a bus, that bus has probably got a certificate of loading to take at least half of that again. And so that's the way it works in terms of what I would call the legal loading limits of buses. So it's not just the seats, they are certified for standing passengers too within a certain limit, and that's all explicit in terms of each bus and laid out. So we do need to do a little bit of terms of what I would call education of the public. We're not really used to these what I would call sort of busy network days. We've had a few years where we haven't had that. So making sure that people know the tools to use in terms of AT Mobile to be able to check the capacity and make decisions on what service they're going to take. So we will be doing it on the daily to make sure that we get through this next bit and be able to manage on the fly. We do have some certain things on standby to be able to pull levers if necessary. So we do have the Eastern line back, as Dean said, albeit we have some really big challenges across our rail network, and we do have pockets of the network that will have the likes of single line running, late night ramp downs, etc. But we've really tried to keep all lines running during the day to make sure we maintain the integrity of the network. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. And we've got Hamish Bunn online. So Hamish, welcome. And if you can take us through the capital program development for RLTP. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Hopefully you can hear me. Apologies for not being there in person. So this is just by way of a quick update on where we are in terms of development of the Regional Land Transport Plan. You'll all recall that we've been through the process of developing the long-term plan with the Mayor's proposal that actually gives us quite a bit of direction in terms of what should be in our capital program and the operating funding that's associated with that going forward. And then that has now come through in direction to us in the letter of expectation. So there's already a lot of direction in terms of the evolution of Auckland Transport's capital program coming through the long-term plan. Our next steps, though, are starting to rank that alongside Kiwi Rail and NZTA Waka Kotahi programs. One of the key issues that we are facing, though, is that until the agencies have the government policy statement on land transport, and until we have it as well, then some of the government direction isn't available. And we've been advised that the draft GPS is now not expected until the end of February. So the impact of that is that we can't do the ranking of projects until we have that information, because I think you'll recall that the RLTP needs to be consistent with the government policy statement as well as reflecting council direction. So overall, that's going to sort of delay our process and will give us some real challenges in meeting some of the statutory deadlines, whilst also ensuring that we've got the governance, because of course we're very keen to work with the Transport and Infrastructure Committee to ensure that you've got the opportunity to provide some feedback on the development of the program, and we'll be seeking your endorsement of the RLTP itself. I should note too that when we're going through this process of ranking, we are working with NZTA, Kiwi Rail and Auckland Council officers. So it's very much a joint RLTP development process. So assuming that we get the GPS towards the end of the month, we have some workshops planned there with yourselves to take you through the kind of ranking and development process and the way that the overall RLTP program is shaping up. And then towards the end of April, we'll be seeking your endorsement of the draft document. And that's probably likely to need to be an extraordinary meeting given the timeframes. So that's just a quick update. As I say, we've got the guidance from the long-term plan, and now once we get the guidance from the GPS and a better understanding of what the Waka Kotahi and Kiwi Rail proposed projects are going to be, then we'll be able to come back to you with more information on the way that's shaping up. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamish. So I do think we've got performance metrics, which I'm happy to talk through, or do you want to take questions? I'm sorry if I've asked the same question a few times.
No,
but I want to check in.
you can maybe run through the performance
Okay.
metrics pretty quickly, Dean, and then we'll take questions.
Sure. Okay, thank you for that. I'll invite Stacey if she wants to pick up on these few around public transport. Are you okay with that, Stacey? Or do you want me to talk to them on? I feel like I've just put you in it, haven't I?
No, absolutely fine. I mean, this is obviously old data now in terms of relative to what we've been talking about for December. So I guess the key message is we are over at SOI target in terms of our predictions as of December. In terms of that, and at that stage though, within December we're at a sort of a bus recovery or weekly recovery rate of about 82 to 84%. All things are not equal. Obviously bus is higher, trains been a lot lower, and in December we had significantly less trains in operations due to the Eastern Line still being out, so there's quite a big difference in terms of recovery rates across the modes, which is probably important to note. So when we look at in terms of reliability, we'll go to the next one. We are above our target as well. So obviously the bus driver shortage has stabilised, and that is working really well. We have had continued disruptions, as I said, in the rail network, which has impacted the train reliability, albeit we did have a good couple of weeks there. The way we sort of move towards punctuality and measuring that now too, you're getting a much more sort of realistic perspective in terms of punctuality of buses. In the back end, we're still measuring first stop as well as last stop, so we can see where things are going wrong in the network, so we're constantly sort of improving in terms of that real-time response when it comes to bus reliability from a punctuality perspective. But all things considered, we believe we're heading in the right direction in terms of that. We've got obvious constraints still across our ferry network, which is discussed in detail. That's obviously amplified heavily by what the prior conversation with Ports of Auckland was in terms of those cruise ship movements in the basin, which has disrupted December, January quite a lot in terms of what I call the ferry reliability situation. Good news in the fact that with the accelerated training program, we are slightly ahead of schedule. Fullers are slightly ahead of schedule where they are. We're putting on an additional sailing to Gulf Harbour as of next Monday, one in the morning and one in the evening. And so trying to obviously make sure we keep really tight on that so we can see what's happening so we can move forward quicker and faster. I think they're probably the key highlights. Yeah. Okay.
So I'd like to touch on safety now if I can. You've all received a copy of this. As you can see, the 12 months to September last year, we continue to see increase in death and serious injury across our transport network. I don't have the information for the last quarter available, but I have shared the important stat of no death on Auckland's roads over that holiday period. You can see a continued trend there around an increase in motorcycling fatalities, and you can see the trend there around serious injuries. None of these are satisfactory. So this continues to be a real concern because safety of the user of our road networks or our transport networks is one of our primary statutory but also governance objectives as Auckland Transport. And there you can see the trends by local board over the last 12 months where our injuries and deaths are occurring across different types. The top 6 local boards represent 50% of the DSI, so we know where these incidents are occurring and we have good crash analytics, so we also understand where on the road network it's occurring, the type of injury and the type of event that led to that. The largest growth in DSI, you can see we're Albert Eden, Papakura and Waitemata, and you can see the information there around where death or fatalities occurred across those local boards. So these are areas that we want to focus on with our safety program and the interventions that are needed to help reduce that risk whether walking, cycling, motorcyclist, or driving a vehicle. There's an update here on our capital expenditure program. We're sitting at 85% of what we'd committed to deliver. With a strong summer season, we expect that we will be right where we need to be in terms of our commitment to deliver on our capital program. Our target is in that 95 to 100%, maybe 105% of our capital program. The objective being there that measuring the capital program is a proxy for us delivering the outcomes that ratepayers expect of us. The dollar amount isn't a measure of the outcome, but it's a good proxy that we're on target for doing so. Highlights across that investment program are the North West Rapid Transit Network, implementation of the Rodney targeted rate around footpath construction, the Oraki infrastructure projects. So there's really good progress occurring, and it'd be remiss of me not to mention the Eastern Busway project, which continues to be on time and on budget. Operating performance year to date, we're managing our operating costs well. So we talked about capital cost, we're now talking about operating cost. We're 20 million favourable. You can see the reasons for that. We expect to finish the financial year in a similar condition as to what we are currently at. So there's no large unforeseens at this stage. And we have got a real focus on how we can increase the sustainability of our own funding within the tools we have through growing parking revenue, through managing the infringement component, and delivering cost savings through the way that we deliver both our services and our capital programs. So all of those are combining to deliver a favourable result. On that note, happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dean, and the AT team. Now, I see there's a wealth of transport information there going back to December. Some very encouraging trends, some concerning ones, but as well. So I'll just remind councillors, we're looking to try and get through the meeting before lunch because we've got another meeting in the afternoon. So it'd be helpful if we keep the questions reasonably succinct, and we can maybe just, if we do need to get someone up, we can maybe just state what the topic area is, so if there's anyone that needs to come up. Dean, I'll leave you to decide whether you can answer it or not. Okay, having said that, Councillor Turner, Hills, Sayers, Walker and Henderson.
Thank you. My question goes back to the very beginning, Mr. Leggett, is when it sort of came to mind. Mr. Kimpton, you told us before Christmas that we were in a subsidy problem where every extra fare we got, etc., increased our deficit. It didn't reduce it. How are we going to get ourselves out of the subsidy loop?
So public transport is a public service. That's a really important principle. And as a principle, you've also agreed to top up the cost, the true cost. Having said that, we have an explicit objective around how we want to reduce the impact on the ratepayer and the taxpayer for that top up, okay? Which is what you're talking about. Yeah. And so that goes to a number of things. We're looking at the evading of paying fares. So we know that that will have a benefit in terms of reducing the impact on ratepayers and taxpayers. We know that when we get the open loop system in, which means that you can use a debit or credit card or a smartphone, whatever it is, you'll be able to pay. And we know that we're not capturing part of that audience because some people arrive and they don't have their hop card and the bus driver's left with this decision, do I let them on or not? Or some people choose not to catch the bus or the train or the ferry because they don't have it, and so they'll catch an Uber or a taxi. So we think there's an audience out there that will choose to catch public transport because of its cost-effective nature that we're not currently capturing. And the third big lever we've got apart from advertising and promoting it, is actually better utilisation. So when Stacey's talking about 44 seats and we can put another 20 standing, that's better utilisation. You've got a fixed cost for a bus, and if you can put more passengers onto that same bus and do it safely and legally, then we get better utilisation. So we're looking at all of those things and how we drive reducing the impact on ratepayers and taxpayers. Very committed to it. We understand the link and we want to reduce the burden.
So Hills?
Kia ora, Chair, thank you. Thanks, team, for all of that information. The first question, just Stacey, and thank you for taking my calls earlier in January around my concerns about full buses already. March Madness seems to be January, February, March, April. The issue is not so much the bus, because I think you've got that out to us, but I do have real concerns, and how in contact are you with KiwiRail, just seeing the really disappointing, I think every day or two we're getting operational constraints, crew issues, signal failures, after so long of people waiting for trains to come back. How does KiwiRail realise how upset and stressed out our residents are when this happens?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. Look, I'm not sure they really know. They don't feel it like we feel it in terms of that. Are we in regular contact? Absolutely, on the daily. It's been a really challenging couple of weeks, because obviously coming back and with the Eastern Line wanting to rail to actually have a good go at recovery, they haven't had that opportunity. This is the first time where we've had all 4 key lines, well, in terms of actually operating for a really long time. And so in terms of that, they have been doing some other upgrades, so signalling, and so then there was multiple issues last week in terms of signalling faults that came off that and their ability to respond. And so it's, yeah, really frustrating from our perspective. We're kind of at our wits' end, to be honest, in terms of that, but because these feel like very familiar conversations that we keep having, and that's not a good place for us to be. In terms of that. So we're working very closely with KiwiRail, understanding their constraints, but the thing is we've had a lot of disruption on our train network for an incredibly long time, and everybody's been very patient with it, and I think everybody's a bit over it. And the risk we have is that people don't come back to rail. The risk we have is that CRL is not a success because people don't have confidence in the services. That's the biggest risk. And so, you know, solving some of these funding challenges, the maintenance conversation, it's got to be critical for us all to put focus on that over the next few years in order to be able to get it right. Absolutely. So still having speed restrictions on our network shouldn't be acceptable to us. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for the school bus information you sent me. Can that be sent to all councillors if they don't have it? The other issue, very quickly, a yes or no, or come later. Are we still planning with crew training to have increased services sometime, hopefully this year, on Birkenhead, Bayswater and Devonport?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And moving to traffic management, and just want to say, Tracy, Lawrence, Andrew, everyone dealing with my micromanagement, I guess, over November, December, January. I guess my question is, how can we streamline what, and I'm glad I was helpful, but the feedback, the teams have been amazing from Auckland Transport. Is it time that we move traffic management in-house? Because it seems like once you guys get involved, things were on these huge corridors, extreme disruption, tweaks coming from me change things. Or, you know, so in-house, is it possible to save money and get more simple things happening? And B, how can we deal with what I feel like is other utilities, I won't name them, and private developers really taking us for a bit of a ride, and your team's being surprised that things are happening. It hasn't been Auckland Transport issues in my experience lately.
Thanks for the opportunity to address these questions. The short answer is the analysis we've done on bringing TTM in-house is no. It's not more efficient to do so. Okay. There's a large capital impost to imagine if you had to buy 17 attenuator trucks, for example. It's just not really something that we want to do. We should be able to work with the new industry steering group under the guise of the new NZG Guide to Temporary Traffic Management that has been put out by Waka Kotahi NZTA to better manage the industry. And what that does is actually shifts a lot of the risk back to the contractor, so some different decisions will be made other than the profit motive that they've had in the past, where I think the previous code of practice allowed them to gold plate. So we're moving away from that. The other thing is that we've learned over December, January, and so far in February, we've just popped more eyes into the TOC, into the Transport Operations Centre. A new initiative is we're trying to get ahead of you, what you're seeing and what your Facebook feed's telling us. So we've got someone literally sitting beside the operators in the TOC this week with schools back, looking at the top 50 intersections, so everywhere we've got eyes on the network, to use technology instead of people to cover these areas, but also we've got a set of worksite hotspots. A number of them are in your area, but we've got them across the region, where we're actually looking at those sites with the cameras multiple times a day. We're monitoring queues, we're monitoring congestion, again, to get ahead of that tipping point where customers start to come to us and to you to report those things. Yesterday we had some amazing learnings. We found an unapproved site. We worked to change traffic management set up to avoid congestion instead of letting the congestion happen. So that's in train, and I think that's directly out of the conversations we've had over the summer period. The last part of your question,
I think that's probably fine. And very last, and it's maybe a comment, Chair, there's a massive issue with lights not being, so we've had some intersections, we've been told it's a vector issue, I don't know if it is, but 6, 7, 8 months the crossings haven't been turned on, so they sit there and the public are very angry about that, and I keep getting told, and it gets changed month after month after month. It's
So thank you, Councillor, for that one. I'm irritated by it as well. So I've had a direct discussion with our team, our construction team, and they've given me a full list of all those locations where we put pedestrianised signals and a time frame for completing that work. There has been an issue with getting fibre to those locations because we don't want them just to be local signalised. We want them to be part of a network. But having said that, I've said some of the delays just aren't acceptable. We've created a safe environment for crossing. We just haven't provided the signalised component, so it leaves people confused. So we are onto it, and the delay has not been acceptable.
Yes, thanks. And as far as the questions on the rail network goes, Councillor Hills, Barry's inviting Kiwi Rail to the next Transport Committee meeting. Okay, Councillor Sayers.
Thanks, Chair. If we could just go back to, Duncan, if we could just go back to one of the previous slides there. I wanted to drill down on the one about the accident rates, and I noticed that Rodney Ward was at the top of one, so I just want to understand, the next one, I think just went past it. So those charts there, can you just elaborate a little bit more about what causes are causing, those top wards to be experiencing those numbers, Dean, and what the fixes are? Yeah, what we're doing about it, or need to do.
Good question. And so you'll see that right at the top are the more rural local boards. So it probably comes as no surprise that the bulk of that is speed related in terms of that, because obviously you've got more higher speed roads in those particular areas. It's also a volume and size thing as well. So you're always going to have, because this is not what I'll call measured against kilometres of roads or population based. And so you do get a slightly exaggerated, obviously, for Rodney and Franklin due to that, because they're really, really large, big areas as well in terms of that. Key things, and I think we went into this probably the end of last year, is we have seen a huge increase in the likes of motorcycles. So, of course, if you've got more high-speed areas, you're going to have a higher volume in terms of percentage and be impacted by that. Yeah, so key themes is definitely still what they always are. They haven't changed dramatically, and that is speed and alcohol, and of course distraction in terms of what those top things are.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sayers. Maybe an opportunity for you and Councillor Baker to get that out to your areas too, because they're quite disproportionately high amongst the local boards and have been for time and eternity, I think. Councillor Walker.
Sure. Got two or three questions. The first one is just around the technology that you're employing, and obviously, you know, we know you're putting some work into dynamic laning and the like. But as far as encouraging efficiency of movement of vehicles, do we have any adaptive technology at our lights and so on that enables smooth movement? For example, I was travelling along Quay Street the other day, and I think I had to stop at every set of lights, and it just didn't make sense at all. The only competing use in the main were pedestrian flows across, but I'm sure there would be a way to have some form of adaptive traffic signal technology to facilitate things like that.
Thank you for your question. Yes is a simple answer. Virtually all of our sets of signals on the network are controlled through an adaptive smart system. I mentioned earlier about real-time optimisation and technology basis to improve that. So obviously we've got thousands of sets of signals across the network. So to have individual sets of eyes from our operators looking at every single one is not realistic. So we do actually focus on those areas, as Tracy mentioned earlier, where there are hotspots and we know there's issues. Particularly in the city centre, we do put a lot of emphasis on managing those sets of signals. So, as you said, there's a number of, if you like, competing demands on those signals. People crossing the road, it is a heavily pedestrianised or pedestrian area. People are going to buses, people visiting businesses. So we do need to balance the throughput of traffic, buses, but also the ability to people to use the road network safely.
Okay, so just a supplementary question there. So are we using SCATs, or is there some other facility? Is it mostly SCATs that we use?
Yes, so the signal system that we do use in Auckland is SCATs, and that's
Okay.
national as well.
Okay, the other question I've got, and I don't need an answer to it right now, but myself and my fellow councillor, the chair, take a keen interest in the electric ferry rollout, and I just wonder if it would be possible to have a progress report on how the build of those ferries that are, you know, largely government funded, you know, through Shovel Ready are progressing. So just raise that issue. And then the other question I've got just really follows on from Councillor Sayers and others, and that's just around the deaths and serious injuries. Is it possible to source some form of breakdown that does give an indication of what the reason is? For example, Stacey mentioned speed, alcohol, distraction of light. There may be other things, because it's
Stolen vehicles.
What, yeah.
it's getting out of hand, and I guess often the observation I make is that it may not matter what we do in terms of spending money on safety if the underlying characteristics relate to how people are driving. That's maybe where we need to put the emphasis. So is a breakdown available?
Short answer is yes, absolutely. If you'd like to go through your particular areas in detail, then we can arrange for that to happen. But I do recommend that within our board reports that are published monthly, there's a much more greater detail in terms of causal factors and the likes that will give you sort of more information. It can be very detailed, so it's important to obviously, I would recommend having one of our safety team sit and take you through that to help understanding. Yeah, but I will say this, because you mentioned about it going in the wrong direction. Actually, we're doing a lot better than other parts of New Zealand, and that's largely due to the investment that we have had in safety interventions. So that's important to remember. You would have seen over the holidays it was horrendous, but it wasn't here. Yeah, so hopefully.
Commendations too, just on the enhancement of the Gulf Harbour ferry service. So that's.
Rachel Hunter, it will happen, that famous ad. Councillor Henderson?
Thank you. I've got 4 questions. One of them on congestion charging, but it's not sort of really a question. More that I'm sort of requesting or asking when you guys are going to come back to us with more detail on this, because I've had a lot of constituent concerns come to me around the program. So have we scheduled that yet?
Yes, so on congestion charging or time of use charging, we have a full methodology, but the critical path item is knowing what the legislation is, and that's our request to the Mayor's Office and you as councillors. If you want this in as a tool to manage demand primarily and revenue second, then we need to know what the legislation looks like. That's the critical path, but we're more than happy to continue to update you regularly on progress. But I just want to make the point, we can't progress unless we've got a view of the legislation.
Okay, yeah, cool, thanks for that. Just some sort of forum to address some of the concerns I think would be really helpful. Turning to the Northwestern Busway, so do we have plans to get the interim Northwest ready for March Madness? How's it all going?
Fabulous question, Councillor. I mean, it's been cranking. So we recently, a couple of weeks ago, we reached 100,000 passenger boardings on the WX, which was really cool. So it has, it's been really popular. Very real constraints. We are actually going to be situating some people, particularly in those Te Atatū area, because the loadings there are getting really busy. We do have concerns about our ability to respond with additional fleet in this particular area. So that's something that we're working through. It may be that we end up doing short runners. So what I mean by short runners is instead of starting at Westgate, we start at Te Atatū in order to sweep up bulk loads of people so that we don't end up having full buses by the time you get there and nobody at Te Atatū gets on. So we're working dynamically like that to do.
That sounds really promising, thank you. So 2 more questions, but they are quick, about DSI. So we've heard today no deaths during the holiday period. How are we defining the holiday period?
That'll be the official holiday period. I'm scratching my head. But I think it was the day before the Christmas weekend before Christmas, and the first business day back after the new year.
22nd December.
Yeah.
And finally, just in terms of DSI, we've had some central government changes of direction that have been signalled. So is AT working with the government to continue and increase investment into speed management? How are we lobbying?
Well, there's several dimensions. This one is speed management in the form of speed settings, which is our Katoa Kaora program, and another dimension to it is the investment in safety-related infrastructure. But the safety outcome on our road network is not just a function of those 2 elements. Those ones we have significant control over. There's education, there's enforcement, there's a range of other tools for which others are responsible, particularly the police. So to get to that outcome, we need all of those parties contributing. So there is significant discussion from all parties, including the health sector and the academic sector, on the impact of safety on society and the social outcomes. So all of those conversations are taking place, but in part, irrespective of what the government determines it wants to invest or how it wants to invest in safety outcomes, and they've signalled part of that will come through renewals and maintenance of our road networks. This council has to decide its position on what it wants to invest as well.
Sorry, just to follow up, thank you, Chair, just a little one. So to be clear, are we advocating for investment into safety outcomes as AT and as council?
Well, Auckland Transporters, that's why we bring to you DSI stats every month. That's why we continue to consider what the safe system interventions are across the network, and that's why we've consulted with the community on speed management outcomes. So we see safety as a priority, a statutory objective, and a priority from an organisational perspective. I do want to add, though, that we understand that we need to deliver that cost effectively, because as a council you also ask us to deliver value for money in the way that we invest in safety outcomes. I accept that responsibility because we can do it cost effectively. And I also, and I'm expanding on your answer, but I think it's important, is that we hear the objective of the government of the day around productivity across some of our networks. So, look, the tension that puts into it is how we ensure particularly pedestrians are separated from vehicle flow. Okay, and so it's an interesting, if not important, tension in the way that we design safe system interventions. Okay, so we're thinking through all of that and have been. Our own mayor and you as a council have challenged us to deliver this more cost effectively. So all of the above, but you as councillors also need to have a position on it. Auckland Transport does.
Councillor Williamson, online.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd like it if it was possible to have a quick comment to the new chair, Richard Leggett.
Richard can hear you, Morris, even though you can't see him.
That's good, that's cool. Okay, Richard's introduction speech today as the new chair sent some very cold shivers up my spine. He made a really big emphasis about walking and cycling and a really big emphasis about public transport. And I understand why those are incredibly important, and especially if you live where he lives in Parnell, cycling into the city and so on is a very viable proposition. But I didn't hear him mention anything about the biggest ward that Auckland Council's got, the Howick ward, which is bigger than any city in New Zealand other than Wellington or Christchurch, and which has 92.8%, according to the census, of people here that use the car, private motor car, or using a public vehicle, a company vehicle for their main mode of transport. And when Richard also said we're not going to be able to build more roads, I don't actually think that's right. I think there are some more that have got to be done, like East-West Link and so on. But I'm very concerned that he didn't seem to understand that there are some roads being taken away from us all the time. And a good example was I went to war with Auckland Transport about Lagoon Drive many years ago. And I said, if you take the lanes away from Lagoon Drive, you will create nothing but mayhem from the Pakuranga Highway trying to come through. Auckland Transport didn't listen to that. They went ahead and took away a lane in either direction in order for the Eastern Busway to be built. And Richard, I would please welcome you to come out one day with me, any day you choose. And I will, as I've done, sit my camera down on a tripod on the cycleway, which is a very gold-plated cycleway. And I filmed up to 1 hour and 20 minutes without seeing one cyclist on it. But I rotate my camera over to the Pakuranga Highway and see nothing but cars, locked, blocked and stopped. And I'd also like to remind you that a predecessor of yours, Chairman Lester Levy, sent out a memo in 2015 saying there was no need for the Reeves Road flyover, which was going to be the solution to getting vehicles out of our electorate and over to the motorway. And he said it wouldn't happen for at least a decade. Well, a huge kerfuffle occurred. AT did a complete reverse and he said he was wrong and they would move forward. Well, we are in 2024. The release he made was in 2015, and a decade means next year is the decade, and we are still not seeing the Reeves Road flyover. Now, I know it's in the plan, but we are dedicated to, as you said, public transport and cycling and walking. But I'd like you to know that Auckland Council is much bigger than Auckland City and the central city. And I'd really like to, on behalf of the huge population out here, explain to you that, for example, last night when I finished at council at 4 o'clock, it took me 1 hour and 37 minutes to get home last night. Now, that may have been the only hunger fire or whatever, but I have to tell you, I can drive from my house here in Pakuranga to my place in Pawanui quicker than that. And so we are much more important than just the cycling, walking and public transport network. There are people, and I remember, repeat again, 92.8% in the census said they use a car, are the passenger in a car, or use a company vehicle. And I'd like to just make sure that that is made very clear that we are important as well.
So,
Can I
Richard,
respond,
you,
please?
you can respond briefly, or you can wait to your private audience with Councillor Williamson.
No, I would like to respond. I think you misheard me, Councillor. I did not actually actively promote the fact that we need a whole lot more cycling and active transport. What I said was I am a very keen cyclist, and I do cycle everywhere, so I have some affinity there. What I said, tried to say clearly, was that public transport is going to be the unlock over the next 10, 20, 30 years to enable Auckland to be a great city. And what I also said was it needs to be desirable so people can choose whether they use public transport or their private motor vehicle. I did not say anywhere in because I did write a few notes before I came along, I don't think I said anywhere in my brief introduction that I was anti-car or that I was against the car, or what I tried to say...
No, I never used that phrase either.
Well, you implied it.
Okay, so I think we've probably covered that off, and there'll be no doubt the opportunity to explore things at a more appropriate time, perhaps. So we are starting to get caught in the mud here a bit, folks, if we're looking to finish off our meeting where we want to. So we've got questions remaining from Councillor Dalton, Foley, Councillor Lee and Councillor Darby.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. Actually, my question is for you, Richard, too. Thank you and welcome, and I look forward to meeting with you too. Look, you've probably noticed that you have no women directors on your board, and I just wondered, on behalf of the women of Auckland, this has been a significant step back for us. So if there is an opportunity for some advocacy to the Performance and Appointments Committee that have appointed the directors, that, or however else we get a woman's voice. Dean, you've got some good strong women here and, you know, doing your ops work, and it's great to see. But we must have women in governance, and that this is not anybody here's fault, it's on this side of the equation.
Agree 100%.
So if we could, please, for the women of Auckland, get our voices back at your board table. Kia ora, thank you.
So, well made point, Councillor Dalton. Councillor Foley.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. I'll make this quick. My questions relate to slide 14, which is still up there, which is good, and about the very concerning statistics, in particular for Otara and Papatoetoe, for the fatalities going up by 200%. And that is really concerning. So I would like a breakdown that was offered to a previous councillor. I'd love to do that and sit down with the safety team member, perhaps with the local board as well, if that's being planned, just to make it efficient use of time for staff. But my question is around an issue or a concern that Councillor Walker raised, that we can put in the speed management, we can put in the infrastructure, but that may not affect the behaviour of drivers. It may be the behaviour of drivers that is really the problem. So what are we doing in terms of working with the local boards, with mana whenua, with community groups and with the police? Are we investing at all in that and looking at community-driven solutions to find ways to actually change behaviour? If at all, are we doing anything in that space?
We do have very good, what I call road safety partnerships with the likes of NZ Police and NZTA, ACC, in terms of those community initiatives, like particularly like the motorbike focus one recently, which was within our communities teaching people about riding safely. Yes, we do. We do a lot of that. Do I think we can do more? Absolutely. I think in terms of that, and I think we talked about this before, one of the biggest inhibitors to what I would call getting to where we need to be is the enforcement part. So police have really stepped up in terms of their enforcement, particularly with breath testing. But in terms of what I would call point-to-point cameras and rolling those out, quicker, faster, and you get a better level of compliance. Because right now, it's like our parking in terms of that. The penalties for non-compliance are abysmal, like they're really, really low in comparison to anywhere else in the world that you go in modern cities. So they're super, super low. We did do a lot of advocacy work a couple of years ago, particularly to look at fines and penalties and to review that framework because it's not working. But enforcement is key because if only your speed limit changes, you're not going to get the full benefit of change.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fully. I saw a young guy on a motor trail bike going over the Mangere Walk Bridge the other day, no helmet, flying past all the people fishing. I don't know if he's listening to too many of the safety campaigns, but certainly enforcement is vital. Councillor Lee.
No, thank you. First of all, I guess, Dean and your colleagues, management colleagues, Happy New Year, all the best for the coming year. To Mr Leggett, congratulations and good luck in your role. And can I personally acknowledge outgoing Chair Wayne Donnelly. He was acting Chair actually, probably a world record for an acting Chair, and thank him for his contribution. I enjoyed working with him. A question. In regard to public transport, I absolutely agree with Mr Leggett that public transport is an absolutely high priority for all of us, and the budget figures will tell you that we're spending billions, essentially, not just through AT, but directly to CRL Limited on public transport. I just want to pick up Mr Leggett on his claim that we are over, if I heard him correctly, the lockdown pandemic crisis, we're back and we're performing well on public transport. No, we are not. Now, Mr Kimpton said that AT is 92% of its own goal, which I'm not sure that was, but the last hard data I've had from AT was in December, 20th of December, from Richard Harrison, and you have to analyse the figures, but actually our performance per annum has been 79 million passengers per year, and immediately prior to the pandemic it was 102. So we're still not even up to 80% of pre-pandemic performance. We are well behind other cities, probably the worst performing in Australasia. We're not going to improve that until we acknowledge it. No point in saying and convincing us and convincing yourselves even that we're doing really, really well, because at this stage we are not. So I wish Mr Leggett well in his ambition to see us doing really, really well, but we ain't there yet. That's for you to achieve, and good luck for achieving that. The other point I would make, just a small point I guess, but it is important and it picks up on the concerns of Councillor Williamson, and that is Mr Kimpton said we're lifting to increase our performance or our revenue from parking. All well and good, but the fact of the matter is AT is deliberately removing car parking, at least from the inner city and other parts of the region. So what we are seeing here is AT is going to extract more from less. But of course the less are the people of Auckland who manage to get a park, and one can assume they'll be paying more for it, and that's not helping the inner city, where an integrated, balanced approach for transport is absolutely essential, just like any other city. The other point I would make is more general, and that is with all the good news we get from AT, there's a kind of a growing gap, a credibility gap, and almost like a parallel universe in Auckland where inside this chamber everything is going well, successfully, on the up and up, but outside, if you read the Herald or look online or talk to people, like for instance the chair of the Cairo Business Association, they are livid with AT, and so we have to move past that. There's no point in manufacturing a good story. We have to have a genuine good story, and so Mr Leggett, I wish you well in achieving that. If Mr Kimpton can rationalise the 92% with the 78 to 80%, or where we are with public transport right now, that would be helpful. Thank you.
A couple of questions there about the figures, about the reduced parking, increasing charges, and I think some of the well highlighted issues just recently, such as Miola Road, might merit a response. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll touch across the top. Look, Councillor Lee, thank you for your well wishes. Second point. We have debated this many times, and I disagree with you around patronage. You quote annual fees, I agree. It's annual patronage, and I agree. Your numbers are right. What I shared with you is what happened last week. Last week, we hit 92% of our target, and that's the difference. And I've only ever promised, and I'm on record for it constantly, that we will achieve month on month our target. We know that a rolling average, it takes you 12 months to get to the new target. That's the difference between an annual rolling target and a monthly rolling target, and what we measure weekly and what we measure daily. Okay, so I can't express it any more simply than that. Until we get agreement that you have that there's a difference between an annual target and a monthly and a weekly and a daily, I think we'll end up in the same spiral. The numbers I quote are correct, and we are doing well.
I didn't say they were incorrect. I didn't say they were incorrect. I would say the claim that we've solved the patronage problem is wrong.
Well, let CEO to answer the questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So look, the information I'm sharing is factually correct. I'll be on record for it. Secondly, we talk about removing parking, and so this council chamber, as does the board and the executive and the Auckland Transport team, understand there's a balance between providing for particularly bus priority in certain parts of our road network and how we manage parking in those environments. And K Road is an example of that. It is not the only example. We see it down Oniwa Road. We see it through our road networks. The number of car parks, though, we have over Auckland is tens of thousands. We don't charge on many of those car parks, and some that we do charge on we're removing. So when I talk about parking revenue as one source, but we've also got revenue sources in addition to that allow us to be more self-sustainable from a funding perspective, the number of car parks we remove, I understand, is disruptive. But the disruption is with the objective of enhancing the public transport outcome, particularly in the peak. So you can't have dynamic lanes, bus prioritisation, and enhanced productivity through any corridor without also balancing how you manage side street parking. So that's what we're talking about. It's a tension in there, and I understand it's disruptive, and there is a change process to be gone through. I've been down many of these roads, particularly at peak, when they are clearways and cars continue to park. One car will be parked and you'll get 10,000 people disrupted that are trying to go through what is otherwise a clearway. So we know that there's some work to be done. The other thing is that there is no story in a good news story, unfortunately. So what we find is that many of the instances where we have achieved really good outcomes, we have to tell the story as Auckland Transport. I will continue to tell that story. What we like to debate, though, is the negative, because in that is the story, apparently. But that's not in my world. We've got 1,800 people that are absolutely committed to delivering awesome transport outcomes for the people of Auckland. And there's a lot of good stories in there. And it's on me as the Chief Executive to tell that story on behalf of the team and on behalf of the people of Auckland. And we do that. So there is a lot of good stories. We will continue to tell them. Thank you, Chair. I've finished.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Councillor Darby?
Thank you, Dean. That was really well put. Thank you. And on that note, Dean, on Waitangi Day, I took a almost 5-hour bike ride with advocates, Great North Road, Greylin, and Miola Road, Point Chev. And on Miola Road, the project management there, and it was 27 degrees. It was a hot day. Dempsey Wood were beavering away, doing that road. And locals brought food and drink as I was there out to the crews. And I stopped and we had a chat. I said, this team is fantastic. We're all happy. That's the real locals. And you're right, that story probably won't show up, but it's a real story. And I took that on board. That's what I'm here for, but I also do want to acknowledge Wayne Donnelly. Wayne Donnelly, briefly, is one of the wisest men in transport I've come across. And big gap, but major contributions Wayne has made on the board. Acknowledge him. Just something that I want to just cover, because I want to make sure that our regional land transport plan is Auckland's plan. And my understanding is a regional land transport plan is a regional vision, in our case, Auckland's long-term vision for transport outcomes over 10 years. It's called the Auckland Regional Land Transport Plan. Hamish said it has to be consistent with government direction. I can't find anywhere in any legislation, any MOT, any Waka Kotahi direction, that it's consistent with government direction. I understand it's more about Auckland's transport objectives, policies, measures, and the investment plan that delivers on all of that for the next 10 years. And we've had this contest with previous governments, and then previous governments and their agencies, be it Waka Kotahi or Kiwi Rail. I understand we work with them, but what is your view? What direction are you giving to the crew in terms of it being Auckland's plan for transport as opposed to being consistent with government direction?
That's a complex question. So the Auckland's Regional Land Transport Plan. Can I start off first with, it's very important that Auckland, and in this context I'm thinking Auckland Council and Auckland Transport have a view on what we're trying to achieve for transport outcomes in Auckland. I think we've lost our way a bit in that. It's very important we have that view. And we might call that the Auckland Integrated Transport Plan or whatever we're going to call it. We need that view, okay? That informs the RLTP. But at the same table, when an RLTP is approved, you've also got NZTA and Kiwi Rail at that table, okay? So it is the regional land transport, not just the Auckland Council, Auckland Transport Land Transport Plan. And I know that you know all of this. So that RLTP and the statutory approval process that sits with that relevant committee within Auckland Transport needs to take all those things into account. And what we also need to understand is that Kiwi Rail's funded through Treasury, Waka Kotahi NZTA is funded through the MOT, and Auckland Transport is funded through Auckland Council. So those budgets come together in the one. It's incumbent on us to, when we develop that plan, is to understand what the investment intentions are. And I think that's the context in which Hamish is using and needs to be consistent with. Because if we're not, we'll never get agreement around that table. In the same way, Auckland Transport wouldn't get agreement around transport investment in Auckland if it also didn't collaborate with its funder, Auckland Council. That's the context. Is it a statutory context? I'd have to go back and double check. But in terms of pragmatic way forward, is it the context? Yes, it is.
Right,
that's how I use consistent.
Yeah. Well, I know that we've got Hamish online there. He can maybe clarify that statutory requirement or otherwise. Are you able to do that, Hamish?
Yes, just quickly, Section 14 of the Land Transport Management Act requires that the Regional Transport Committee satisfies itself that the RLTP is consistent with the GPS. It was a key feature of the judicial review of the 2021 RLTP, so it's something that we're quite familiar with as a requirement. But, you know, for the reasons Dean outlined, you know, because it is a multi-agency process that's really about bidding into the National Land Transport Program. That's the kind of basis for it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Hamish, for that clarification. Let's hope these last three councillors, Fletcher, Ferry and Councillor Stewart.
I would like to reserve my right to speak at the end, but my question, I want to acknowledge firstly Richard Leggett. It's really pleasing to see you come on the board of Auckland Transport. Not only do you bring a wealth of governance experience, but I love your passion for conservation and the Kiwi Trust, so I was very pleased to see that appointment there. Having served on the board of Auckland Transport myself, I realise that the issues are not simple, and it's really important to keep your eyes on the strategic overview, and thank you for acknowledging the importance of the integrated transport plan, and I hope that we don't become distracted in terms of the core focus that we need to bring to that. I'll speak to, perhaps, if I may, with the permission of the Chair, Mr Donnelly, at the conclusion of the session. But one of the things that you raised is the importance of trust. And so I want to raise, Wayne, the Dean rather, in terms of representing constituents who have raised the issue of Meola Road with me, the concern that I've got is that of trust, because I think that there was a measure of goodwill around the closure for the timeline that was forecast. And people can cope with disruptions, but they don't cope with disappointment when there's a failure to deliver on things that are promised. As somebody who's really enjoyed 25A over the holiday period, Waka Kotahi has earned forever a big gold star for me for, you know, sticking to timelines, in fact, delivering early. Meola, perhaps, Dean, you need to speak to further on how we can have confidence and how we can support you in your objectives if we don't have trust on deliverables. So would you like to expand on this current situation and what is occurring in Meola, and why was it, with all of the work that you put into that project, why did you not forecast the timelines accurately when informing the public that there would be those closures?
So the original closure was for 6 weeks. The project team discussed with me a couple of weeks ago, there was an opportunity to accelerate the total program, reduce cost and reduce disruption by extending that closure. Not for the residents that are on the length of that road, but for those that use it. So with the current proposal that went out for the additional closure of Meola Road, we will complete the project 2 months earlier. We will save up to 400,000, and it'll allow us, if we opened it, there'll be 3 stop-go intersections along that length. What we have considered and identified is that actually the movement of traffic in that environment will be more efficient with the existing arrangement than going through a multiple stop-go process. So before any decision was made for that change, we went out and talked with local board chairs and key stakeholders. And that includes the football the local football club manager, okay, who will be shown exactly what the proposal is. It was discussed with him. He's going to go and have a look, understands that access to and from that site will be available at all times. So we've tried to do the right thing. We've looked at the better, faster, cheaper objective, which has been placed before us. We've then discussed with the local board and key stakeholders. So we've looked to listen and understand, and then come with an option to better deliver a project, which we know is very important to that local community. I have asked the team though, what have we learned from it and what would we do differently? Because I recognise the trust equation, and I will reflect on that further, Councillor Fletcher, before I come back to you. The challenge is sometimes when you're mid-flight, you see, of a construction project, you see opportunities that maybe weren't apparent in the earlier design stage. The question is, do we adapt or do we stay with what we had originally planned? In this case, the call was made, we're better to be a bit agile and change, but not before we had discussed. So we did that. But did we get to all residents? No, we didn't.
I appreciate your candid response, and I hope you can appreciate that I, in a governance sense, really want to support Auckland Transport, and I don't want to get caught up in the weeds. But I spend so much of my time, we've had the issue of the ripping up of the pedestrian crossing in Hillsborough that has occupied a lot of my daytime hours and replying to correspondence. And I guess what I'm really trying to say is maybe we need to handle comms better, maybe we need to better understand and scope projects before they commence. So I hope that it's not something that I have to keep coming back on, because I don't want to spoil the relationship that we have, but trust is so very important. And at the moment, within the community, there's a bit of distrust, and I'm sure you're aware of it, and I'm sure it's just something we have to continue working on.
Yeah, I acknowledge that, and to be fair, some of these issues we're addressing occurred several years ago and they weren't right, and we're now getting them right.
Thank you. Councillor Ferry?
Thank you. I had a whole bunch of questions, but in the interest of time, I'm going to put most of those to email. I did just want to follow up on a couple of specific things that we've covered in the questions and discussion already. And the first thing, I guess, is the news that has just broken that the regional fuel tax will be ended on 30th of June. And we have a statement, and this might actually be a question for the Mayor, is we have a statement from the Prime Minister and the Minister of Transport that says that the tax was not being used to fund projects that met the government's and Mayor Wayne Brown's transport priorities. But we have a very clear and I think excellent statement from the Mayor that points out that that isn't the case. So I'm wondering if we can get some clarity on that.
Okay, so we will get the Mayor to respond to that, Councillor Ferry, after we've finished with that.
Thank you. I'll go on with my other questions then. I think that's going to have huge ramifications for all of our work and indeed for a lot of the things we've discussed today. So I look forward to that discussion a little bit later. On the deaths and serious injuries, I'm really interested in, Stacey mentioned, I think it was Stacey, that there was some, or maybe it was you, Dean. Anyway, somebody mentioned that there is some availability of basically being able to do a bit of a deep dive on that. And I note that Councillor Fletcher and I have got an update coming for our ward, a session, so I'd encourage others to take that up. But I just wonder if it would be really helpful, particularly given the conversations here about speed, and I would really love some analysis perhaps next month or in a month or two that gives us that better understanding of whether we are seeing that in the places where we've made safety improvements, particularly around speed, we are seeing fewer deaths and serious injuries. I'd really like some analysis on that, because we're hearing it in bits and pieces, and we're hearing from communities that they feel safer in places where changes have been made. You know, we're starting to get schools saying more of our kids are walking or cycling, but it would be really helpful, I think, for us to have that before us in one of these monthly updates. So is that something that could be picked up, please?
Yes, we can arrange for that. And can I just reiterate the offer? And we've done it with Councillor Williamson too, by the way. We've taken him through the crash analytics database, so he understands what specifically that tool does, more specifically for his ward. So that offer is open to any of you for your ward, or you can look across Auckland in general. And as a matter of fact, we would welcome it, because it's a really powerful tool.
Thank you. The other sort of big picture question I'll ask is just, you know, I guess I get a bit disconcerted, probably understating it, by some of the claims around, you know, percentages of Aucklanders who are driving. Do we have data on the percentages of Aucklanders who do drive? Because for a start, 25% of the population is under the legal age to drive. So I get a bit frustrated by some of those conversations. And also if we had data on who would choose another mode of transport if they had a choice. One of the things I'm aware of with the school buses, I caught the school bus in the 90s, regularly had to stand, sometimes got passed by a full school bus. Obviously that's not ideal, but I think part of the issue we have now is the parent expectation. It's my age group who are starting to send their kids to high school. I have one that just started high school last week, another one that caught the bus today. And we got driven to school. And so we don't necessarily have that experience. So I think there's some real conversations there about parent expectation, but also our broader understanding who, you know, what percentage of our population actually would use other means if they could, doesn't want to be a passenger, wants to be able to determine their own destiny on a bus, on a train, whatever.
Yeah, look, we rely on census data to understand that. There might be some other survey data. Auckland Transport also just needs to consider what it can literally do in understanding parent behaviour, and I think there's limits on what we should be doing. There's expectations of other government agencies and that need to step into this space. It's just not an Auckland Transport-led responsibility for all of those things that go towards safe walking, cycling, driving environment.
Thank you.
Finally, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Mine's really just to, on a positive note, I want to thank Auckland Transport for what they did along the Pakaringa Road, just outside of Simeon Brown's office, all the way up to St Kitts. They've got yellow lines, something we've been